Hello, my name is Tullbery, and today I'm going to be talking about something that's pretty controversial in the Halo community. Yes, today I'm going to be talking about Sprint and...
Like, I literally want to kill this dude. Fucking kill. I don't care. It's not a threat. It's a promise.
I'm joking.
I want to fucking kill this dude.
Stop! I'm the break! Stop!
Okay, I get it. It's a very controversial topic, but I think the reason it's so controversial is because a lot of people have trouble explaining it or even understanding the topic in general. Personally, I actually never really understood the topic. Not that I didn't understand one of the arguments. I didn't understand either of the arguments. I didn't get why Sprint was such a big deal. I thought it was pretty much meaningless. Even if it did change the game, it didn't change it in any significant way. But recently, I've actually thought about it more. I've thought about it in a new way. A way that I find a little more comprehensive than some other people describe it as, and I finally feel ready enough to actually talk about what I think about Sprint. Now, the first point that I gotta get across is that Sprint does change Halo. You know, when you're criticizing anything, you'll get people who say, you know, that's just how you see it, that's subjective.
You know, that's just like, your opinion, man.
You know, in this case, it's not my opinion that Sprint changes Halo, it's a fact, and I feel like I can prove that. Subjectivity comes in when you start asking whether or not you like the new change to Halo. Personally, I prefer Halo without Sprint better, and that's what I'm going to be trying to argue throughout this video. What I'm not going to be arguing, what I'm going to be trying to prove, is that Sprint changes Halo, which I think is objectively true. What I need to establish first is a relationship between three things that make up gameplay: weapon sandbox, map design, and mobility. These three things are completely dependent on each other. If you change one, you have to change the others. For example, let's look at Halo 3. If we made players go a lot faster, we'd have to take away some cover from maps and make weapons a little more powerful, so people can run in and out of cover without getting killed. And let's look at it the other way around. If we made people slower, we'd have to add cover to the maps and make weapons a little less powerful, so people don't get killed as soon as they walk out the door. Now, let's say you buffed all the weapons and made them a little bit more powerful. Now you have to add cover to maps and make people move a little bit quicker to make up for the shorter time to kill. Now let's pretend you added cover to the map. Now you have to make people move a little bit slower, and you also have to make weapons a little bit more powerful so you can actually kill people before they run in and out of cover. Alright, so hopefully by now I've actually made this relationship between mobility, map design, and weapon sandbox pretty clear. Note that when I say stuff like add cover to maps, I know it's a little more complicated than just adding and removing blocks on the map. You also have to take into account jumps and stuff like that that would have changed if you make people go faster or slower. Also, when I say make weapons more powerful, it's not just make them do more damage. I'm also talking about bullet magnetism and aim assist and anything that makes weapons more effective. So all in all, that relationship is your proof that Sprint changes something. When you change mobility, you have to change weapon sandbox and map design. Now, the question is, what happens to Halo when these things are changed? In my opinion, this change causes Halo to lose some combat depth. Before I can explain what that means, I have to explain what specifically changed in Halo when Sprint was added. So Sprint makes you move faster. By the logic of this relationship, that means that maps have to be stretched out and weapons have to become more powerful. Was that the case in Halo? Well, let's take a look at it. Alright, so let's look at maps first. Changes to maps are a bit more noticeable, especially in remakes, but the changes in these maps have been pretty inconsistent. There's some remakes like Ragnarok that are very close in size to the original, and some that are much different, like Truth in Halo 5. Overall, there's a pretty clear trend of new maps being much bigger than old maps. For example, the smallest map in Halo 2 is probably like Warlock, which is much smaller than the smallest map in Halo 5, which is probably like Empire. I think there's a noticeable trend of most maps being stretched out a little bit due to Sprint. Nothing huge, but there's a noticeable difference. Now let's consider weapon design. There's a lot of factors that play into weapon effectiveness. What most people think of is time to kill, which is worth mentioning. The time to kill in Halo 3 for a battle rifle is about 1.6 seconds, while in Halo 5 it's about 1.3 seconds. According to the gameplay relationship, as I explained it earlier, this makes perfect sense, and ultimately 0.3 seconds isn't even that big of a deal. In fact, the BR in Halo 2's time to kill is 1.4 seconds, only 0.1 seconds slower than Halo 5. And here's my problem with looking at time to kill. It isn't that accurate of a measurement. It's only referring to the quickest possible time to kill, which likely isn't even the case, and the other factors of weapon effectiveness are more important to discuss. These factors are aim assist and bullet magnetism. Now, these things aren't necessarily bad. All console shooters actually need them to help people aim with a controller. Even the original trilogy had them. But what was a necessary feature in the original games has gone to some Magneto JFK level craziness in the new games. And it makes sense for these factors to be buffed in Halos with Sprint. People can now move faster, so the player must be given help in trying to shoot at these faster targets. And these effects have only been compounded by Halo 5's unpredictable movement style. So what is the end result? You have some slightly bigger maps and guns with a faster time to kill and more aim assist and magnetism. Now what you may be thinking is, well, how does this change anything? If all these things are in the game to balance Sprint out, then how does this ruin Halo? Well, I lied. Not about it changing the game. It does. I lied when I said Sprint makes you move faster. So Sprint makes you move faster. The truth is, Sprint makes you move faster sometimes. When you sprint, you remove yourself from the combat to move faster. However, your movement speed is back to normal when you're actually fighting people. But none of the changes to balance Sprint out go away. So think about it. You are now fighting in environments that have been stretched out for people who move quicker on average than you, with guns that have been boosted in effectiveness to deal with faster targets. And here lies my problem with Sprint. It ruins gunfights. Engagements have been pushed in a direction that favors a who saw who first style. And I'm not saying it's like Call of Duty, it's not even close, but gunfights have less time to get creative. That means less time to navigate the map in an interesting way while fighting someone. It means less time to combo weapons, less time to use all parts of the gameplay sandbox. It reduces the game's ability to surprise you. You know, the depth of combat in the original games is one of the things that gave Halo its huge following. The game kept surprising people in the infinite ways that the same encounter could play out. Sprint doesn't make Halo lose all of its gunfight depth, not even a majority of it, but it still loses some of what made Halo special, which is a bummer. And that is why I dislike Sprint. And I may have just explained my opinion, but this rabbit hole goes so much deeper. There's so much more effects that Sprint had that I'm not mentioning for purposes of simplicity. I could have talked about how it forces maps to become more segmented and damages vehicle gameplay, but what I found was when discussing Sprint, it's best to keep it straightforward and simple. Instead, I want to discuss what others argue when they talk about Sprint. There's some weak arguments for Sprint as well as some weak arguments against Sprint that I want to just deal with now rather than in the comment section. Alright, so here we go. The most common defense for Sprint, and in my opinion, the second worst, is that Sprint is realistic, so therefore it must be in the game. First off, you have to think of Sprint as a gameplay mechanic. Yes, it may be realistic, but if the game doesn't require it, and it actually makes the game worse, then there's no reason to have it in the game. And second, if in a game where 7 feet tall super soldiers fight aliens, robots, alien zombies, and robot zombies on giant rings in space, not being able to sprint is what throws you off, I think there might be another problem there. So I just called that the second worst argument, and for a while I actually thought it was the worst argument. That is until I saw this video and found the true worst argument for Sprint. If you don't like it, don't use it. This argument shouldn't have to be countered, but since I've had the displeasure of hearing it more than one time, I might as well explain that just because you don't use Sprint doesn't mean that the changes it makes to the game go away. Halo 5 is still a game that's built around Sprint, whether or not you use it. I mean, this argument just confuses me so much. It's like, what do you think happens when you just stop sprinting? Do you think it just becomes a different game or something? I mean, hey guys, it's Tullbery here, and right now I'm playing some Halo 4, and I don't really like Halo 4 that much. You know, it has Sprint in it, and I think Halo's better without Sprint, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop using it, and there we go. Now I'm playing Halo 3. I like Halo 3 much better. It doesn't have Sprint in it. It's a much better game. Thank you so much for watching. You guys can feel free to use this tip. I mean, I don't know. It just doesn't make that much sense. Okay, now let's try to talk about the bad arguments against Sprint, because there sure are some. One of the easiest arguments people try to make is that Sprint is too much like Call of Duty. The whole "it's too much like COD" argument is honestly one of the biggest throwaway terms that people use to criticize a game. You know, Sprint is not a mechanic that solely exists in Call of Duty, or Battlefield, or any other game that has Sprint. Sprint is also in, like, GTA, but that doesn't make it like Call of Duty in any way. Sprint serves a function in any game that it's in, and it's even good for the game in some cases. But in Halo, Sprint's role subtracts from one of its best qualities. Just don't try to tie games together based on one shared mechanic. It really just doesn't work out in the end. Also, saying that Sprint lets people run away isn't always the most accurate statement. In Halo 4 and Reach, Sprint could be a get-out-of-jail-free card for bad positioning in some scenarios, but it was pretty circumstantial. And in Halo 5, now that your shields don't recharge for your sprinting, it makes it much harder to justify this claim, because now you can just run after someone who's running away, and wait for them to stop before finishing them off. It's still annoying and frustrating, but it's not the best argument you can make. At the end of the day, this is my take on a very hard subject to explain. I presented my argument as to how Sprint changes Halo as an objective truth, so if you logically argue against my explanation, I won't call it your opinion. I'll actually consider your statements, maybe even change my own thoughts on the matter in return. What I'm saying is that I can be proven wrong. And before I end this video, I want to make one last point about innovation in Halo. Starting at Halo 3, Bungie tried to add an element to the sandbox. First, it was the equipment, then in Reach, we got armor abilities. Neither of these were necessarily groundbreaking and incredible, but they were attempts to add to the sandbox in an innovative way. I feel that 343 tried to do this in Halo 5. However, the expansion of the mobility sandbox fundamentally changed the game, rather than just supplemented it with a fourth element. And besides that, it really wasn't that innovative. Ultimately, they followed a trend of enhanced mobility that is currently in control of the FPS scene. I get that they wanted to bring something new to the table, and I appreciate their effort, even if it wasn't something nobody has seen before. The point is that Halo should keep innovating in ways like 3 and Reach. They should try something new that doesn't change the core gameplay, but simply adds to it. The original formula for Halo games are already tried and true. What 343 needs to innovate by is just adding this fourth element to mix up the gameplay, add something new, surprise us. Still, there are much more ways to innovate than just gameplay. Look at Halo 3. The game didn't add as much polish to its predecessor as Halo 2 did to Halo CE, but it was innovative due to its unprecedented community features. And to be honest, 343 has done exactly that with Halo 5. The new Forge is absolutely incredible, and the custom game browser was the biggest step in community features since Forge was introduced. As much as I may criticize 343, Tom French, the Forge team, and everybody involved with adding the community features have done an incredible job. So, in conclusion, I don't want Halo to stay the same. I don't want Halo 3.5. I want 343 to innovate the gameplay by following Bungie's efforts to supplement the core gameplay with a new idea. I just think that sprinting and enhanced mobility isn't the right direction, and I hope I've been able to explain why. Thank you for watching.